Hollow moon, spaceship moon, or just a real moon. So back in 1970, two Russians, Michael and Alexander, and I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, forgive me, they said that because prior to 1970, NASA had done some tests and a seismometer said that the vibration of the moon made it sound like it was hollow. In other words, it vibrated. So, of course, these guys then said, well, if it's hollow, then it's probably a spaceship. Now, they're not too far off, but there's a couple of problems with theirs. One, they say that the mantle or the crust around the moon is too shallow to be real. So they're saying it's a metal spaceship covered with fake dust and rocks and stuff. My problem with that is, look, we know the moon's been here for millions of years to help the tides, otherwise we wouldn't be where we are now. So the moon has been here for a long time, and if they're covering, if an alien race has to cover a metal object in space because the dinosaurs are going to be looking at it thinking, that looks a bit fake. No. So we have to get the idea that it's a metal object, because certain alien races actually dig into either a meteorite or into a planet and take a lump of rock out. And this is a spaceship that went round Earth fairly recently and actually had a slightly weird trajectory, and I think it slowed down from memory. So, and that's called the Oumuamua. Forgive me for my pronunciations again. But why they do that is because they cut in just one section into a massive lump of rock. And I mean, this is huge. I think it's a mile or more long. The aliens do, and then they hollow it out, and now they've got a perfectly great spaceship that doesn't have the nuts and bolts that our spaceships had. So in other words, it's got less to go wrong with other than the one entrance. Now we'll get back to this because our American humans have actually boarded that already, and that's a whole another story, which I'll get to later on. So alien races, yes, I've also heard that alien races have picked up rocks and stuck them together to make a planet. I know it sounds really crazy. They crunch up meteorites and basically make a new planet out of it. So I personally believe that the moon is a real object with aliens inside. I don't think it's a metal object. I just think they've just hollowed it out. Whether or not they brought it here from somewhere else a long time ago, obviously no one's going to know the answer to that. But I do believe it's a real object, but have aliens inside researching and doing stuff. Life on Mars. I'll talk about sentient life on Mars on another video, but for now, life on Mars, yes, there is. We know that because NASA's actually admitted that in 1996, Earth received a meteorite that came apparently from Mars, and it has microscopic life on that meteorite. Now, there's also methane on Mars, which is caused by biological things decomposing, basically. So we've got to ask ourselves, does NASA lie to us? Well, this original picture here was one of the first pictures of Mars, and it has a blue sky, and that's what it would look like. However, a lot of people said, but you said, NASA, that the planet's red and therefore it should have a red tinge. Yeah, next thing you know is they reproduce the same image, but they put a colour filter over it, and they say, oh, sorry, it was our fault, we cocked up, it should really be red. So just before I carry on with Mars, I just thought I'd let you guys know that over on the YouTube channel, which you guys had asked me to set up, I've now done a live chat, and it's on there, and I will be doing more live chats. So that's the first one there. So if you go and search Our True History Parts, if you just add the word parts, you'll find it for sure. Our True History Parts, you can watch the first live. Now, I should be doing these roughly every Monday around noon. So if you're around on TikTok, come in and say hi, and then I'll be uploading them to the YouTube channel, so you'll not be able to miss them So feel free to come and ask questions. Okay, so face on Mars. I personally don't believe it's a real face. I think it would be very egotistical of a race to actually leave a face pointing upwards. It wouldn't have benefited Earth because we wouldn't have had the technology to even see it, let alone understand what it meant back then, because we probably had dinosaurs here. So I know there's people out there that say it's definitely genuine and everything else, but I just can't get behind that one, I'm afraid. But we do know NASA lies. I mentioned in the previous video about the sky, and then they realised that they should really pretend it's red because they don't want people to know you can actually breathe on Mars, which I'll go into later on when I catch up to modern times. So if they've lied about the atmosphere on Mars, then do they lie about such things as these are objects that people have found on the NASA photographs that get sent back? All sorts of weird objects. Now, I will do another video about how they use a place on Earth as a stand-in for Mars, and then they pretend that the photographs from that place on Earth is really Mars. So I'll cover that in the next one. But there's a hell of a lot. If you just type in strange artifacts on Mars, you'll see loads. You'll even see the subterranean levels or tubes, which I'm just trying to find now, but I will cover that when I get up to modern day, because that is something that's more modern day. So there is really fascinating. There's videos out there, people's done it already, different types of videos. It's quite compelling to think that there is these objects there. I totally believe that there is objects there, because I totally believe there's life on Mars at the moment, which I'll go into on another video. So just remember, NASA, the old saying, never a straight answer. So I'll let you guys decide. Thanks. Hopefully see you on YouTube, if not on the live TikToks. NASA actually, I think, owns an island. If you can remember the name of it, please tell me. I've been searching for the last hour. I can't remember the name of it. And that's where they do their testing. It's a no-fly zone. No one's allowed near it. Now, I think a lot of their pictures that they pretend is from Mars is actually really from this island. And the reason why I say that is, for example, this here is one of the pictures they say was on Mars. And look, it's a rat of some description. And there's so many more. There's bones on there on this particular pictures that they were showing at that same time. And there's also a plank of wood, which, if it was an island, could have been washed up some time back. So I'm just saying that you know, some of these rovers might not actually be on Earth, so just bear that in mind. The next video I'm going to talk about is the life that was on proper Mars and why it was wiped out. There was life on Mars. There was water, atmosphere, green grass, nice place to be. They were more advanced than us, even as we are now, so it's possible they could have come here, but I'll talk about that later on. Now, there was a nuclear explosion which wiped out their atmosphere. There's so many evidence now that suggests that, so it's a pretty common theme now. Here I'm just using this one as an example, showing about the isotopes and the radiation. But why was there an explosion, or more than one? Well, there's three trains of thought on this from different people that apparently in the know. One is there was 2 races on the planet, and a third came along and had a fight with them and blew them up. Second one is the 2 races fought each other and blew themselves up. And the third one is one of the races accidentally set off a nuclear bomb and killed themselves. I'm not sure which one it is. I do know that there was a nuclear explosion. I believe that. The Nazis actually built bases on the moon prior to the Americans getting there, from what I understand. And the Americans had to pretty much agree with the treaty that I mentioned in the last video in order to actually join them on the moon. So now that you've got the Americans and the Nazis on the moon, but the Nazis do run a lot of the show there, which is why I say they pretty much won the war. Now you've got Nazi scientists that came over, von Braun from Germany, and started NASA. So the Nazi influence there, that was called Operation Paperclip, when they brought over a lot of the people that was against America. They actually allowed them in and got them working for them, but in the end it kind of feels like the Nazis won the war compared to America. Give me your views on the first moon landing. Was it real or was it fake? My opinion is it's fake. Various reasons that give that away is, one is the at the bottom of the lander there was no dust that would have been brought up. There was no crater mark or anything whatsoever. I know there's so many other things, about the fake rocks and everything else. And I do believe NASA has faked a lot of the moon landings, but I do believe they have actually been there at least once or twice. The other reason why I struggle to believe it was real is they filmed NASA. The broadcast that people got around the world is this. I don't know if you can even make it out, and that is because NASA used a camera pointing at a projector screen with the footage being shown on a projector screen. So in other words, the broadcast that you got on your TV was being filmed on a projector screen, and there's no reason for them to have done that. They could have broadcast the direct feed instead of having to film so that makes me think they was trying to avoid the stars, because people would have started to work out there's no stars in the constellations, etc. So I think that was fake. Now, just to let you know what I've got you, some of you have asked for, can anything go on Spotify, or at least a podcast? I've now put the live chats that we've done on Spotify, so as a podcast. So if you search Our True History on Spotify, you'll find my live chats that I do with Something to Think About TV. So if you want podcasts, there you go. And don't forget, all the videos that I do plus the live chats are on YouTube, and I've now done a playlist called Our True History Playlist, because someone's asked, can they just have all of the videos so they don't have to watch them on TikTok and keep flicking. So there it is for you. But just going back to NASA now, I will go back to NASA actually landing on the moon, because there's a story out there that one of the missions, there was an extra astronaut that wasn't told to the public about, and that astronaut got off the craft when it landed on the moon to go and look at an alien ship that looked like the Umiumi. I know I can't pronounce it, but that long rock that passed us. I did mention it in another video. Apparently there's one of those on the moon, and it's been there for however millions of years, derelict. Aliens have already scavenged it, but I'll talk about that in another video. Thanks. This is a dead alien woman on a spaceship on Mars. So the story goes, one of NASA's Apollo missions had an extra person or an extra couple of people that went up with the normal crew. When they arrived on the moon, these other people went to this ship that looked like the Umiumi ship, which passed us recently, but the one on the moon is just obviously stationary. It's been derelict. Other aliens had apparently got in and ransacked it. All that was left is pretty much this woman that was, perfectly preserved type of thing, but she was half android, they said. Anyway, they took her back to the ship and brought her back home, apparently. So have a look at that. But also on that same mission, I think it was, one of the astronauts took a picture of an alien that came up to him, and the alien said, "You shouldn't be here." And there's a picture online, but I can't find it. This isn't the real one, but if you find it, let me know. Now, aliens use the moon as a base. Different types of aliens are on there, including Earth people. And sometimes people will say, oh, look, there's a UFO on a video, and then they try and recreate it with a CGI. And they do recreate it, and they say, well, that's how the original was done. Just because you can recreate something doesn't mean that's how the original was done. I don't know if you can see the spacecraft there. Now, they use craters, and they enter through the craters, so that's why sometimes you see lights in craters. There are structures on the moon, but they're generally older ones, and obviously the aliens use the far side of the moon as well. I don't know whether that's to do with the heat from the sun or why, or whether they're just trying to avoid showing us. But I must say this video is sponsored by this book here, Black Ops, Alien Spirits, Bigfoot and Our Untold History. I have a copy of it myself. It is a fantastic book. You can get it on Amazon. Highly recommend it. Aliens or UFOs do interfere with spaceships and probes. Many cases you can have a look on site. So, for example, Voyagers 2 had an issue, but people couldn't work out what it was. Very strange. But then they ended up using the usual one where it's it was someone forgot to do something or whatever. But that's not the most important one. This one here is an image from the Russian probe that was going to Phobos, which is a moon of Mars, back in 1988. Now that object, over 3 or 4 pictures, got closer and closer. It was massive, absolutely massive, and then the probe just died. So in other words, that object was coming to wipe out the probe from landing on there, because obviously there's aliens already there. And now if you're new to my channel, go back and watch video 1 onwards. They're all different, so that's why you need to watch. I know I covered the Moon Girl in a previous video, but I thought you'd find this funny. I've had 6 people on the comments saying different things. So one says that it's fake because it was done by a French artist, and I'm an idiot. Another one said it was done by a film studio, go get a life. Another one said it was done by a cult. So in other words, it was fake and made up by a cult, and I should do better research. I've had 6 different versions of that. But so what I'm saying is, when you read posts and someone says it's proven to be, just take it with a pinch of salt. So apparently it was actually Apollo 20. I couldn't remember and they call her the Mona Lisa. There's apparently a video out there somewhere showing a bit more about this. So if you are interested in this video, or this particular creature in the story, you should be able to find some more information. So it's just a quick video, sorry. Who is in the inside of the moon? Well, the Nazis are, and you're probably saying, oh, he's a nutter. But look, it's not just me. Look, the Telegraph. Why are we still obsessed with the idea of Nazis on the moon? Probably because they were there before the Americans were, and they were. Now, the Americans are there, the little greys, the android type worker bees, and the tall whites are there. I believe possibly the Nordics are there. Some reptilians are there. I'm not sure if it's the Dracos or a different race. But you're probably wondering what they're doing on the moon. Well, they're mining it for sure inside. They're also doing their researches in there, and that's their sort of a base between Earth, even though Earth has got more bases for aliens underwater, etc. But I'll go into that in another video. But you're probably wondering why the aliens with their technology and everything actually need us. Well, let me just give you an example. There's a place somewhere, a secret place in the States, which is a rendezvous point. Now, certain species of aliens come down and trade with the American, when I say the Americans, the secret military complex, and they trade for clothes, human clothes and human food. So you've got to ask yourself, why does a certain type of alien want to take human clothes and human food? You know, is it for slaves or whatever? But what happens is the Americans then get given technology, and they mess around with this technology. Now, guess what they do? They actually enhance that technology. The Americans actually enhance the technology. I'm sure this goes on with the Nazis as well, but I'm just using the Americans as I've heard about this. So they enhance the technology. Now, when the aliens come back, or a different race of aliens come back down, the Americans then trade that new, improved version of whatever the technology was. Obviously, this is over a period of time. It's not done overnight. They trade that technology back for more technology from the aliens. So apparently, we are very good at creating things and ingenuity, whereas it appears a lot of the alien races have become stagnant. You know, they've obviously got this massive IQ, but the initial spark of thought. Now, I'd heard this actually, you know, almost when I was a bloody kid. People saying that, oh, the aliens want us because we're clever. And I used to think, well, that ain't right. Surely that can't be right. But we're clever in a way that they're not anymore. But it goes back to the question is, why do they need human clothes and human food? And I'll talk about that in another video. So the American personnel, I'm talking about Americans because I know more about them than the Nazis, are kind of treated like slaves, and the Council of Aliens don't like that. So the way the Americans get around this is they clone their body, the service person's body, to be 20 years younger. So when they finish their tour of the moon or wherever they're working, they get their soul or spirit or whatever you want to call it goes from the older body into the younger body, and then they're time traveled back 20 years. Make of that as you will, but that's and apparently they don't then get the benefits of the pay, so the only thing they've got is the knowledge. So there's some whistleblowers out there that say that, but I must just quickly say that I've now added a drive time chat to YouTube. They're about 20 odd minutes, and they cover one whole subject per time. So this one's about ghosts. So do subscribe. Please subscribe to my backup channel. It's called Our True History Replies, as in I would reply to you. Just in case anything happens to this TikTok account, you can just search for the other one now and just subscribe, and then you'll always be up to date with me. Also, don't forget I'm on YouTube. So I was just looking here, and I found this website. It's called, and it's basically, it says scientists say natural underground tunnels will be ideal for people to come. Like, yes, that's because if you watch the other video, you know there's already underground tunnels made by the Martians. We might as well call them Martians. Now, Corey Good is just one whistleblower. Now, make of him as you will, but he does actually say the same thing as me, which is the Germans were there way back in the 30s because of the help, as I mentioned. Now, he also said that when he was there in a military capacity, they were having wars with other alien races, not the Martians, but other alien races on the moon, which begs me to think that we create. Mars has domes. Now, this is just one picture here which shows something. That's if you believe this was taken from the ground of Mars, but a lot of people go through the orbital photographs of NASA's and they can find these strange anomalies, such as these domes here. Now, supposedly they're made out of glass, according to whistleblowers, but it's not just domes. Look at these, although this is a rendering, it's not the real picture, it shows what is on Mars, and there's 3-mile high pyramid type structures, again supposedly made out of glass. Now, you're going to say glass is a bad idea. Now, bear in mind, this was probably when this was covered over with glass and everything else. Now, NASA is actually working with glass at the moment. Now, I've looked into glass, and it turns out that if you make glass in a zero gravity environment where there's no moisture, glass, certain types of glass, how you make it, is stronger than steel. I thought I'd show you some pictures supposedly from Mars. So someone with a keen eye noticed something down there, and when it's blown up, it kind of looks like some sort of humanoid figure riding something, maybe moving along on the atmosphere. Now, the atmosphere on Mars, supposedly from whistleblowers, is not what we're told by NASA. It's not breathable. You still need a suit, but it's not anywhere as bad. So we'll just have a look at some other pictures here. This is, well, you can probably guess what that looks like on Mars. And this is a strange thing. It looks like lichen, I think it's pronounced, which is a creature type thing, apparently, I think, that grows here on Earth. So it's kind of weird how it looks like it's there. And there's other objects here that looks like that. So I just thought I'd show you some. Quite fun. So on Mars, Randy Kramer says that there's 6 to 7 million people, including aliens, on there, all working away. Now, as I say, Randy Kramer's not the only person that said this. Now, when he's done with his tour, which he says was 17 years, he then was taken to a laboratory on Mars, and they took his spirit, his soul, from yeah, you guessed it, from the head, which is, if you've watched my other videos, connected to the pineal gland, and they take his soul, which or spirit, whatever you want to call it, same thing. He sort of says, you know, he doesn't really know what to call it, and then they transferred it into a cloned body of his, which was 17 years younger. So he's done the tour for 17 years, and then they suppress his memory while in this new cloned younger body, and they send him back in time. Around 415,000 years ago, Ninjarag came to Earth as the chief medical officer. Now, she was the sister of Enki and Enlil and son of Anu. Now, she stopped at the away point, which we know is Mars. Now, she found Alalulu, who I mentioned in the last video, dead. But what was interesting is his grandson, who was living on Mars with him, created a face as a tomb for Alalulu on Mars. So that's apparently the face on Mars belongs to him, which is really interesting if that's true. Now, I have to quickly say, yes, that time again, frigedooralarm.com. If you go to the site, if you want to just go straight through to eBay, it's just one click from that button, and that's the eBay listing there, only $12.99. And it's got different settings, so it's got a timer setting, but you can also have it so it beeps. You've probably worked out that our ancient past has a lot better storylines than EastEnders. So, Ninshurag, who was on Mars, left Mars to come to Earth, and she was with child, yes. So, her son was Ninurta, who was also Enlil's son. So, remember, they were brother and sister. Technically, they were half brother and sister. Now, they were out of wedlock, which was apparently a naughty thing to have done. Now, if you look at the time scale, there was tens of thousands of years had passed since Enlil had come here to Earth. So you can imagine how long their birth takes if he hadn't, unless he went back, and we've not been told, and I'll have a word with him about that. But no, so we don't know whether he went back, but the first information that she came here is what we've got in our text. Now, she came and she stayed in a place called Sipor, where she became the sort of head medical person. And we can know all of this because actually they've given us maps along with the cuneiform tablets, so we can sort of fairly surely say that this is all correct. Now, there's other places as well that became important around that same time. So this was now getting on to about 360,000 years ago. So bear that in mind. They haven't created man at this point. So 360,000 years ago. This place here, Bad Tiberia, yeah, I'm pronouncing it wrong, was set up to refine the gold that they was getting from Abzu. Now, if you watch the other videos, you know that Abzu is South Africa. Some other notable places is Lagash and Lhasa. What they were kind of set up for incoming spacecraft to, have somewhere to the people, the Anunnaki, to go to. So there were sort of cities that once they arrived, they would go to these places here. And there's Eridu, as I mentioned previously. So it's all heating up now. There's more to come. Don't worry. There's going to be fights and all sorts of stuff. So the Anunnaki have really told us everything that we really need to know. And I hope you're all enjoying it still. I am. When I was talking in the last videos about Ninurta, he obviously attacked and beat Anzu, or Zu, and that was around 300,000 years ago. Now, obviously, his mum turned up 300,000 years ago to Earth, expecting a child, which was Ninurta. So when we say things like 300,000 years ago, there could be a difference between 5,000 years, which is quite long. So obviously, by the time Ninurta went off and attacked and beat Anzu, he was probably in his 20s in their terms as opposed to our terms. So that was that. And also Ninshurag, probably pronounced wrong, stopped at Mars. Now, she stopped at Mars on the way to Earth 315,000 years ago. Was there atmosphere on Mars at that point? Mainstream media tell us that 4 billion years ago was the last time Mars had atmosphere, but we all know mainstream lie. So, was there atmosphere? Did she land on Mars and stay there for a short period and then move on to Earth? Which seems a logical thing, just to sit in a spaceship on Mars and then carry on to Earth seems illogical. So there must have been some sort of atmosphere there. Now, as some people have said that there was an indigenous race on Mars before they had a war. Now, whether or not that war's to do with the Anunnaki, I'll get to that down the line on other videos. But there seems to be some sort of nuclear war that happened on Mars. And some people say there was an indigenous race on Mars that were the Chinese people, or looked like Chinese people. And they fled Mars and came to Earth. Now, whether or not this was after Ninsharagar stayed on Mars, I don't know. So these are good questions to ask, because why didn't they use the Chinese people as slaves as opposed to creating humans on Earth if there was them there at that time? Obviously, if there was radiation from a nuclear war, then Ninsharagar probably wouldn't have stayed on Mars. So any thoughts on these? I'd appreciate. Where did the Chinese people come from? Now, there's a theory that they came from Mars, they were indigenous to Mars, and they left Mars when Mars was having attacks by whoever it was that was attacking them. But I kind of go along more with the mainstream, which say that after studies, 97.4% of the genetic makeup is from the ancestral modern humans. That's the people I was talking about that would have been the slaves in the Abzu. So watch my other videos if you have no idea what I'm on about. Plus, so modern humans, plus they're also mixed with Neanderthals and I can't pronounce that. But so watch my last video. It explains how they all are mixed together, which creates all these different races that we've got. Some of my videos are now being pulled off of TikTok before they've even been released. So go to YouTube, subscribe. They'll be on. What if the Anunnaki never created Homo sapiens sapien humans? Well, there's a great piece about that on a website called livescience.com/what if humans never existed on Earth. And basically it talks about what would happen if humans didn't live on Earth. Now, it's saying that there would still be missing animals because of ice age, temperatures, etc. But it does go on to say that the landscape would end up looking pretty much like this. Now, if that's the case, then humans are quite bad because we've literally killed the planet. But it does talk about Neanderthals carrying on our habit of killing things, and then it sort of says that Neanderthals would be like a tribe now. They would be, like the tribes in Africa, so they wouldn't be technologically advanced, but they would be able to communicate and live on the. Whether or not you believe there's a rover on Mars, or whether it's actually on Earth on a tiny little island that NASA uses as a facsimile, NASA has now admitted that there is organic life. So we are not the only planet out there with life. So that ends that. So we're not alone. Now, when the Anunnaki went there, they set up bases as an away station. And supposedly, according to the Lost Book of Enki, there was atmosphere, but it was not great atmosphere. It was very thin, which actually coincides with what I've heard from whistleblowers. And then the Anunnaki wrote down that there was water on the planet. So if there's water, there's a good chance there was plant life somewhere local to that. So that makes sense, but it means who blew up Mars, who set the nukes off if it wasn't the Anunnaki? And I'll cover that. I know I said before I was unsure on the face of Mars, but going back rereading the Lost Book of Enki, as I am, literally it does say the face on Mars, so I'd read that a long time ago. So basically, Alalula, who was on Earth, who had a wrestling match again with King Anu, lost, bit the private parts and swallowed them of King Anu. That his punishment was to be sent to Mars on his own, because no one else at that point was on Mars, and he was to die on Mars because of the poison that was inside him after swallowing the private parts. So apparently there's some sort of issue swallowing the private parts of an Anunnaki, by the sounds of it. Now his grandson Anzu went with him and was a hero for going with him and staying on this planet Mars all alone. There was some atmosphere, and apparently there's some water there, so it wasn't a great atmosphere, and it was just barely breathable. But basically what happened was Alalula did die. And the Anunnaki did say that next time their planet come round, they would pick him back up again, and that's called one Shah. So that instead of a year, the Anunnaki call it a Shah. So they did actually come back round, the next Shah, and they found Anzu, because his helmet had a beacon on it, apparently, and they asked him where Alalulu was, and they said he said he was buried in a massive rock. So they looked at the bones, they pulled out the stones where Anzu had, covered up the entrance. They looked at the body, and then they covered it back up as respect, because he was technically the first king on another planet to die other than Nibiru. So they went up in their spaceships. They took Anzu back up with them, so he's not alone on the planet, although he almost died on the planet. They literally had to give him 60 something or other. The translation's not right, but maybe like a refibrillator or whatever it's called. Anyway, so they went up in their spaceships, and as a sign of respect, they used their laser beams to cut a face into the rock where Alalulu was buried underneath, or inside in the cave part, and they shaped the face to remind. Now the idea was that it was always looking back up at Nibiru, because he technically should have been a king of Nibiru at one point, and was. So that's a pretty sad story, because Alalulu was tricked and lied to by King Anu, and so unfortunately his demise was quite sad. All take a moment to pray for him. So the Anunnaki couldn't get the gold from the asteroid belt, and they tried the rockets into the volcanoes, and that didn't work either. And this was a time that Alalulu was being deposed by Anu, who was younger, and Anu was actually the rightful heir, really, because of the bloodline, whereas Alalulu was from a concubine, as opposed to his mum should have been the wife of the king, but it wasn't. It was a concubine that gave birth to Alalulu. So cut a long story short, Alalulu had a naked wrestling match, as that's what they do, which does give us rise to our Olympics and our Roman games, where they used to watch people wrestle. But anyway, Alalulu was deposed and left, had to leave Nibiru. So he jumped in a ship in the commander's seat, and this is all in the Book of Enki, the Lost Book of Enki. And the moment you've all been waiting for, I can now, over the next few videos, tell you who the angels actually really were, and who the fallen angels really were. So an angel is an Aigigi, and now they are the younger Anunnaki. Now when I say younger, they're the sort of teenagers. Now they last, when I say teenagers, their teenage years are hundreds of thousands of our years. So that's the race. So instead of calling them teenagers or youngsters or young adults, they call them the Aigigi. And these are the ones that went round and did the very menial tasks, such as staying on Mars and transporting the gold that they've dug out backwards and forwards to Nibiru. So sometimes some of the angels, the Aigigi, were used to ferry people around, such as Enoch, which makes sense. A fallen angel is an Aigigi, and the reason for that is they were on Mars and they were coming down to witness the wedding of Marduk, but they had other plans. So when they came down, they actually abducted human women, because they didn't have any women on Mars, and they were doing all the hard work. So what they'd done was they had a base that they had set up in a faraway land, and it was a fortitude location, so that the Anunnaki couldn't actually get back to them and fight them. So they fortified it, and one of the leaders of the Aigigi, now I know Marduk was in charge of those on Mars, but he sympathized with them, certainly, but one of the actual Aigigi was the one that was Lucifer, who said, I am going down to earth and taking these women. There's a Russian boy that seems to think that he is a reincarnation of an alien that was on Mars, in other words, a Martian. I have a few issues with his story. Basically, teachers are saying that he was a very smart boy, blah, 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 and therefore whatever he says is probably true about Mars. However, there are some huge discrepancies. So first of all, it says here that the boy believes there are other children here on Earth that are reincarnations of what they called the Indigo children, and they survived a nuclear war on their own planet. The boy then says that many Martians were immortal. Many, not all. That's a cop-out. Many Martians were immortal, and they stopped aging at 35-year-old, as per him. Which is weird, because why is he dead and now reincarnated if he was immortal? But hey, they are extremely tall and capable of interstellar travel. He said that they would have to hide in air raid shelters because the Martians were having wars with themselves, nuclear wars. And here it says Martians could travel in time and space and would be flying around in spaceships. First of all, the Anunnaki were on Mars. Not one mention in their ancient texts. Now, I know which one I would rather go by, ancient texts or a little boy that's referring to all sorts of fantastical things. And I say fantastical because if you've got time travel, then you would be able to go back and stop yourself from using those nuclear weapons on yourselves, I would have thought. But it gets better. Here it says the giant boy from Mars, meaning because they were 7 foot supposedly, was dubbed by netizens in 7 foot tall. The boy claims that he'd been sent by the Martian race to save the human race. So he was sent back from succumbing to a nuclear war, in other words, us destroying ourselves. He claims that his own race, which was the Martian's race, was originally wiped out thousands of years ago. Thousands, not millions, thousands. We didn't have nuclear weapons back then. So he's not only travelled forward in time to now to warn us, because we didn't have nuclear weapons thousands of years ago. We've only got nuclear weapons in the last 100 years or so. So if his race could travel forward in time, they would have travelled forward in time and seen that they've had nuclear weapon issues, in other words, fighting each other. Therefore, they would have stopped their own nuclear war if they could travel forward in time. But clearly they didn't, because obviously they're now, no one's there. But again, going back to the original tablets, there was no one else on Mars in terms of a humanoid sentient race when the Anunnaki were there, and I will rather always go with the written text than some boy that's got holes in his story, as this is.